Eat less, move more doesn't work, especially if you're working to reverse insulin resistance and lose weight. Simply trying to eat in moderation and watch your portion sizes doesn't work. The truth is, there are foods that are good for insulin resistance that can help you to reverse it, and there are foods that are bad for insulin resistance that can contribute to it. And then of course, there's some in between. So let's talk about the ones you want to limit or avoid. By doing so, this can help you to improve your insulin sensitivity and reverse insulin resistance. First off on the list is fruit juice. This includes store-bought fruit juice and anything that's freshly squeezed as well. Now, I think that most people nowadays know that juice is pretty much just straight up sugar. It's actually much worse to drink a glass of apple juice than it is to actually eat the apple. Juice is just a refined source of sugar that's absorbed very quickly by the body and causes a big spike in our blood sugar. And when your blood sugar spikes like this, a lot of insulin is needed to bring it back down. Now, this isn't an issue in isolation, and especially if you have a healthy metabolism. This is how your body is supposed to work. Blood sugar goes up, insulin's released, the blood sugar is brought back down. However, if you're insulin resistant, your blood sugar and your insulin levels can stay elevated for hours, all from one seemingly harmless glass of juice. Even worse is if you drink it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, because there's nothing else in your stomach to slow down the digestion. And this is important to know for insulin resistance because when you're working to reverse it, the key is to keep your insulin low as often as you can. Your cells are resisting insulin because there's too much of it. So anything you can do to reduce your insulin is going to help to improve insulin sensitivity. But it isn't just the sugar alone that's the issue here. It's actually the type of sugar, which is fructose. Fructose has to be processed by the liver in order to be used. In contrast, glucose doesn't have to be processed by the liver. And because it has to be processed by the liver, excess fructose is more likely to be stored as visceral fat, the hard type of fat that surrounds our organs. Whereas if you have too much glucose, it's more likely to be stored as subcutaneous fat, which is the squishy type of fat we store elsewhere in our body. And this is important to know because visceral fat is highly associated with insulin resistance. Having visceral fat is a key indicator. You are much better off eating fruit whole than drinking it as juice. Number 2, cereal. This is another morning favorite that isn't doing any favors for your insulin resistance. Just like juice, it's even worse when we have it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. Because it's almost entirely made up of carbohydrates with only a little bit of protein and usually next to no fat, the blood sugar response when we eat it is pretty significant. And again, this requires a lot of insulin to deal with. Number 3, baked goods. So we're talking any muffins, bagels, cookies, anything like that, not great for insulin resistance. All of these foods contain refined carbohydrates, which again require a lot of insulin to process. Now, I just want to point out here that you don't have to cut these foods entirely out of your diet. Yes, you want to minimize them as often as possible, but as a one-off thing, if it's someone's birthday, if there's a slice of cake or another dessert you want to have, it's not going to derail your progress. You want to strive for progress over perfection. You don't have to be perfect to see results. However, you do want to make good choices as often as you can. Number 4, dried fruit. This one is bad for the same reason that fruit juice is. When you remove the moisture from fruit, it becomes a more potent source of sugar. Again, you're better off eating the fruit whole than drinking the juice or eating it dried. Number 5, flavored yogurt. Flavored yogurts usually, number 1, have a lot of the fat removed, and number 2, contain huge amounts of added sugar. When it comes to yogurt, make sure you're buying an unsweetened option that doesn't have the fat removed. Even better if you choose a Greek yogurt because these are higher in protein. Number 6, bread. Bread is not a great option for anyone who's trying to reverse insulin resistance and keep their insulin levels low. And yes, I'm talking about all types of bread, white bread, whole wheat bread, rye bread, even sourdough. Sourdough is the better of the bread options because it's fermented, so it's easier on your gut and beneficial for a few other reasons as well. However, it is still high in carbohydrates and it does still cause that blood sugar and insulin spike that we're trying to limit. So again, progress over perfection. You can still have bread, just make sure to pair it with protein and fat if you are gonna have it. But if you can cut back on it, you're gonna get better results. Now, I know this is one of the hardest foods for people to give up. Bread is such a huge part of Western diets. We have our eggs on toast, we have sandwiches, we have bread rolls. But again, any small changes you can make to even cut back on it or just be a little bit smarter about it are going to help. Now, before we get into the rest of the list, I'm going to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you're thinking about building a website for your business or even for personal use, such as for a blog, Squarespace has got you covered. Their award-winning customizable templates will give your website a polished and professional look, while also being highly customizable. You have complete control over colors, fonts, sizing, photos, and more. Their templates are beautiful and professional. Not only did I build and run my website with Squarespace, but I also manage my email list and design and send out newsletters through Squarespace as well. You can also run an online store and accept payments. And these are just a few of the amazing features that Squarespace has to offer. If you want to check them out, you can head to squarespace.com/healthcoachkate. I'll put the link in the description box down below as well. And make sure to use code healthcoachkate at checkout to save 10% off your order. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Number 7, pasta. Like bread, pasta is very high in carbohydrates. It requires a lot of insulin to process. So if you can reduce the amount of pasta in your diet where you can, this is going to help. Again, if you can add protein and fat to your meal and not just eat the pasta kind of in isolation and just with added carbohydrates, that's gonna help too. Even better if you can switch to a lower carb option. I know zucchini noodles, they're not everyone's favorite. Personally, I do think they are really good. They are so good if you're making like a bolognese or something. I don't know, I feel like, personally, I feel like there are a lot of pasta alternatives that are just as good. Number 8, rice. And everything I said for pasta goes for rice as well. This is white rice, this is brown rice. If you can use something like konjac noodles or cauliflower rice instead, this is gonna make a big difference. And I also just wanna mention that these changes that you make, you don't have to make these changes for life. Once your insulin resistance has reversed, once your insulin sensitivity has improved, you're gonna have a better tolerance for carbohydrates. Now, of course, if you go back to eating the exact same diet that got you insulin resistant in the first place, then it's going to start to come back. But you can go forward once it's been reversed with more carbohydrates in your diet. You just have to be a little bit smarter about them. Number 9 is vegetable oil, which is an interesting one. Vegetable oils include canola, corn, soybean, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, and rice bran, which ironically, none come from vegetables. They actually all come from seeds. Now, this is a different one because obviously vegetable oil, almost 100% fat, so it doesn't have the same issue that foods high in carbohydrates have when it comes to insulin resistance. But there have been studies, mainly done in animals, where vegetable oils were compared to other oils, such as olive oil. One study had half of the mice consume corn oil and the other half consume olive oil. So the exact same macros, the exact same amount of fat, the exact same calories, but the group that consumed the corn oil actually had higher insulin levels and developed insulin resistance. Now, of course, this was done in mice and not in humans, so we do have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's still very interesting nonetheless. Some alternatives include olive oil and avocado oil. These are better options than vegetable oil is. Although when it comes to these two oils, you don't want to heat them too much. They're a little bit heat stable, but they're not that heat stable. If you're doing any high heat cooking, then you want to use something like tallow or ghee or coconut oil instead. All of these are healthier fats than vegetable oil is and great options if you're looking to reverse insulin resistance. And number 10, we have margarine. And the reason you want to avoid margarine is because it's made up of vegetable oil. I know there have been a few brands that have rebranded and labeled margarine now as plant butter. It's still the same thing. It's still margarine. It's still not good for you. Consuming it is going to only contribute to insulin resistance, so opt for a nice natural butter instead. Number 11, pop. Pop is bad for the same reason that fruit juice is. It is very, very high in fructose. Not ideal for our insulin levels in any way, shape, or form. Number 12, we have tropical fruit. Now, I did say earlier that eating whole fruits is better than the juice, but with tropical fruits, they are still very high in sugar. So if you can choose lower sugar fruits such as berries instead, that is going to be a bit of a better choice. Again, progress over perfection. Make good choices when you can. Everything's on a spectrum. So eating tropical fruit is going to be better than drinking tropical fruit, but eating lower sugar fruit is going to be even better. Number 13, fruit smoothies. And I'm sure you know where this is going if you've watched the rest of the video. Like juice, when we're drinking smoothies, we are isolating the sugar and drinking it in massive amounts. Now, of course, there are ways to make smoothies more blood sugar and insulin friendly. Again, choosing those lower sugar fruit options such as berries. And if you add healthy fat to it, so add some avocado, add some coconut oil, this is going to help to slow down digestion and lower that blood sugar and insulin response. Finally, number 14, we have alcohol. No one is ever happy to hear about this, but alcohol directly contributes to insulin resistance. Similar to the way that fructose has to be processed by the liver, alcohol does as well. And it tends to get stored as visceral fat, which once again is highly correlated with insulin resistance. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to end on a positive note, which I briefly touched on earlier. I know it can be discouraging to see a long list of bad foods, but again, it doesn't mean you have to avoid these foods entirely and that you can never eat them again. Yes, they should be limited to some extent if you want to reverse your insulin resistance. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You do need to make some changes to your diet, and sometimes these changes are going to be hard. But I really don't think it's as hard as a lot of people think it will be. Again, we don't need to be perfect. Make good choices when you can, as often as you can. Everything's on a spectrum, so even if you do something that's like a slightly better choice, that's better than the alternative. All these small changes you make, they will add up, and it will eventually be worth it when your insulin resistance is reversed and you're feeling a lot better. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section down below if there are any specific foods that you took out of your diet that you noticed big changes in your insulin resistance from. And before you go, remember to check out Squarespace. I'll put the link in the description box down below. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.